We've been throwing around the words constitutional crisis pretty much the entire time that Trump has been around, but now might be the very first time where it is completely undeniable.
This is not a drill. This is the apocalypse.
Trump had a meeting today with Bukele, the president of El Salvador, and the whole thing was absolutely bonkers because both presidents pretended like there was nothing they could do to bring back a man that the Supreme Court said must be returned to the United States. After they got some pushback from the reporters, Stephen Miller, Mark Rubio, and the presidents themselves all tried to defend their actions, acting like this was a perfectly normal thing and it was okay that he got deported and also that there's nothing they could do to bring him back. But the scariest part was that after the meeting, Bukele and Trump had a hushed conversation where they didn't seem to realize they were being recorded, and Trump flat out admitted that he wants to send United States citizens to El Salvador. Check this out, it's absolutely insane.
Homegrown criminals next. Yeah. I said homegrowns are next. The homegrowns built. You got to build about 5 more places.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right. It's not big enough.
No, yeah.
Come on. So this is a much different office.
He said the homegrowns are next. You're going to have to build 5 more places. The homegrowns? What Trump just said should send a shiver down everybody's spine. Now, of course, this isn't exactly new. We know he's been floating this idea a little bit based on what Caroline Leavitt said recently. Here's that clip.
So the president has discussed this idea quite a few times publicly. He's also discussed it privately. You're referring to the president's idea for American citizens to potentially be deported.
Right, he's floating the idea of potentially deporting citizens. And they might say that they're only going to deport heinous criminals, but we know that's not true because they're deporting migrants who aren't heinous criminals. The Trump administration has been flat out refusing to accept that SCOTUS told them 9-0 that they have to return Mr. Garcia, the Maryland father who was mistakenly deported. Now the Trump administration has been saying that they have no power to bring the man back because he's in El Salvador now. But now that President Bukele is in the room with them, chumming it up, and they were asked by reporters, this is how they responded.
The man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador?
Well, let me ask Pam. Would you answer that question?
Sure, President. First and foremost, he was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country. And in 2019, 2 courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country. Right now, it was additional paperwork had needed to be done. That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled, President, that if, as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters, foreign affairs, if they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane.
I feel like I'm losing my brain cells listening to Pam Bondi come up with an excuse for why they can't bring him back. The word facilitate does not mean that you just provide a plane. The president of El Salvador is sitting 5 feet from you, Pam Bondi. Demand that he return Mr. Garcia. They just refuse to do it.
Would you answer that question also, please?
Yes, gladly. So, as Pam mentioned, there's an illegal alien from El Salvador. So, with respect to you, he's a citizen of El Salvador. So it's very arrogant even for American media to suggest that we would even tell El Salvador how to handle their own citizens as a starting point. As 2 immigration courts found that he was a member of MS-13. When President Trump declared MS-13 to be a foreign terrorist organization, that meant that he was no longer eligible under federal law, which I'm sure you know, you're very familiar with the INA, that he was no longer eligible for any form of immigration relief in the United States. So he had a deportation order that was valid, which meant that under our law, he's not even allowed to be present in the United States and had to be returned because of the foreign terrorist designation. This issue was then, by a district court judge, completely inverted, and a district court judge tried to tell the administration that they had to kidnap a citizen of El Salvador and fly him back here. That issue was raised with the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously, stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the President could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador who, again, is a member of MS-13.
Now, that was a lot of bullshit and lies all at once, so that might have been a little bit hard to catch all at once, so let's just start at the beginning. Stephen Miller says that 2 district courts found that Kilmar was a MS-13 member, but that's not true. A district judge never found him to be a member of MS-13. Instead, they found that the claim that he might have been was enough to deny him bond. The evidence towards him being a gang member is this. One of the men that he was arrested with in the Home Depot parking lot said that he was a gang member, although he had no proof or other evidence. When he was handed over to ICE, the government claimed that he was a member of the MS-13 gang because, quote, he was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat and hoodie, and a confidential informant claimed that he was an active MS-13 group based in New York. He has no tattoos relating to the gang, no charges related to gang activity. He has absolutely no history related to the MS-13 gang, other than the word of some guy who was also in the process of getting arrested and may have been trying to get a sweetheart deal by throwing some others under the bus. Miller also said that the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 in their favor, which is flat out not true. In a 9-0 ruling, the justices declined to block a lower court's order to facilitate bringing back Kilmar Abrego Garcia, which means that Judge Zini's directive to return Mr. Abrego Garcia must go through. The only change, really, is that the word effectuate may not really be appropriate, arguing that the district court should clarify its directive with due regard for the deference owed to the executive branch in the conduct of foreign affairs. Apparently, the word facilitate is more appropriate, which of course the Trump administration is taking full advantage of, pretending like there's nothing they can do to bring back Mr. Abrego Garcia.
And what was the ruling in the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0
In our favor.
in our favor against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual, at El Salvador's sole discretion, was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time. No version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it, per the court, can only be directed to him.
Now, the Supreme Court technically ruled against the Trump administration, but they gave them such an easy out by saying, well, it's the president of El Salvador's decision, not Trump's. And of course, President Bukele knows how to play this game, right? So when asked about whether or not he's going to return this man, here's how he answered.
Can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm supposed to be suggesting that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right?
It's always
how can I
CNN.
smuggle? How can I return him to the United States? Like I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
But you can release him inside El Salvador.
Yeah, but I'm not releasing. I mean, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. I mean, we just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into the releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? No, that's not going to happen.
Well, they'd love to have a criminal, released into our
I mean, there's a fascination.
They would love it.
Yeah.
They're sick. These are sick people.
Oh, we're the ones who are sick people? You're the one who diddles children on Epstein's island, Trump. Allegedly. Let's not get in trouble here. I mean, what pisses me off about this is that they're acting like we're stupid here. They just said that they are supposed to facilitate the return. All he has to do is let him go to the United States. What's this about smuggling? Now they're trying to move the goalpost to make it seem like it's completely impossible. And what scares me here is that they're going to send United States citizens to this El Salvadorian prison because they're, quote, heinous criminals. But that's not going to be true. These are going to be protesters or just liberals or maybe people who are protesting against our foreign affairs of the Trump administration. They're going to send those people to El Salvador, and then they're going to act like there's nothing they can do to bring them back because President Bukele doesn't want to release violent criminals into his country. I mean, this is absolutely horrifying. Red alarms should be blaring everywhere across every state because right now we are actually in a massive constitutional crisis. The stage is already set with anti-Trump protests bubbling up all across the country. At the same time that 22 states are cracking down on anti-protest bills. Mark my words, this summer, Protests are going to erupt, and Trump is going to give the same order to Pete Hegseth that he gave to Esper. Fire on these protesters, round them up, and arrest them. And the first thing that they're going to do is deport them straight to El Salvador. They'll call them violent criminals, and we'll never hear from these people again. Folks, it is now more important than ever to get politically involved and do whatever you can to stop this constitutional crisis. I'm Tony Hinderman with Really American, and I'll catch you next time.